Welcome back to the Chasing Common Ground podcast. Now, I have to admit, it has probably been a few weeks since I've recorded the last episode, and it's been probably maybe a month and a half since the last time I've had a guest. So, with that said, I'm super pumped to bring Mike Howard back to the show, and I'm just going to pump your tires for a bit here, Mike, because I think you bring a lot to the podcast scene that maybe people don't realize about you. Some of that is the amount of podcasts that you consume yourself. Some of that is like the depth of life experience that you have to bring into a podcast conversation. And some of that is the books that you have read and the books that you've enjoyed and like your reflections on them. So there's a lot of directions that we can go with this. But first and foremost, you recently came back from travel. And so we're just going to jump right into that. Tell me how the travel went for you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you. That's a very kind thing to say, and I appreciate you, and thanks for having me on. And thank you for your patience in me getting all this tech stuff settled. But yeah, I just got back from a trip. We were in Belize, and I've been running retreats for the past. Gosh, this is the sixth one. Started running them. I think I want to say 8 years ago. Maybe it's 7 years ago. 7 years ago. So this is the sixth one. So yeah, it started off with a cool idea, like, hey, why don't we take a bunch of cool people to a nice warm place? In this case, it was Costa Rica. Had an amazing time. And I'm just like, yeah, I'd love to do this every year. And so yeah, we had obviously we had to stop a little bit during the pandemic, but we kind of rev them back up again. So in the intervening years, the past couple of years, we've been to Mexico, Madeira, Portugal, and then most recently Belize. So that was a lot of fun. I mean, it was just I love every aspect of it. Like just like I said, just taking some really cool people to an exotic place where we can, do some movement, some workouts, do a yoga class, eat some cool food, and go on adventures. And it's really all about connection and community and deep learning. We have a deep learning component to it as well. And this time around, I was able to bring an awesome friend and colleague of mine, and who is a counselor. So she brought an amazing element to it as well, with the kind of more of a psychological piece. So yeah, no, I love it. I love the industry for all it is, and the training and coaching, but I like that aspect of it quite a bit. It brings another element into it.
I think it's a very important element that will be probably coming more to the forefront as the world evolves because like we have all this technology that makes a lot of things easier and maybe bypasses the need for certain services within the space. But that human element, like the human experience, cannot really be replaced. And the amount that a person's quality of life and the just caliber of their thoughts is enhanced by traveling and experiencing different cultures, different foods, different environments, different connections,
Mm-hmm.
meaningful conversations. Like it's just really, really cool. So, what I want to dig into is I'm curious on every trip that you have organized and led, would you say it's the same group of people, or do you think that the group of
Mm.
people has changed a fair amount from trip to trip to trip?
Yeah, that's a great question. And all of that was a very nice summary to what it is. That human connection piece is everything, especially in this age of technology. But yeah, no, and that's another great question. I have a core group, I would say, that has been to most, if not all, the retreats. So, and from there, we've added different people over the years. So some people can't go every year, but they try. And then from there, but it is usually people that I've known. Like when I first started this, I first kicked it off, it was basically just a small group of people that I knew well. They were clients and good friends. And then a few people from there in the intervening years kind of took a chance on me, who just found me on Instagram, which is wild. They're like, you know what, I've been thinking about this retreat that I see you kind of plugging it every once in a while. And I keep thinking, yeah, I got to do it. I got to do it. And they finally pulled the trigger and did it. So yeah, there is a few people that we've sort of managed to get on board sort of from our core group. But I would say it's mostly, yeah, maybe half the same people, and then new people, and then people being friends or family. So it's really cool. I love that there is a core group that's kind of been with us. almost from day one, and that we're managing to bring other people on board from there as well. It's great because I've been very lucky that it's been such amazing dynamics each time I'm out, just with slightly different people from slightly different walks of life, and it makes the experience that much better.
I love it. And I think it's cool to hear that there's different people that kind of mix in from time to time because it's one of those things where, in my experience with coaching people both in person and online, like sometimes we are that person's most strongest social connection in their life.
Mm.
Even if they have lots of other social connections, they're kind of working through a lot of their limiting beliefs with their coach or trainer. And
Hmm.
to be able to kind of like put those into fruition in a different country, in a different environment where it's like, no, you can climb all the way up that hill, or you can totally go snorkeling, like just little
Yeah.
minute things. To see those happen is really cool. And so,
Mm.
like, it's kind of when I'm reflecting on our abilities to collaborate with our colleagues and create the best possible experience for the people that we serve, I think about instances where, like, maybe I worked with somebody and then they saw that you were organizing a trip. I would be like, yeah, go on Mike Howard's trip and
Mm.
experience all the best that there is to experience. He'll keep you safe. He'll bring you different, like, experiences that will enhance your
Mm.
just insights on life. And I like to approach it with that abundance mindset
Mm.
because the more better quality of life our people live, the more happy they'll be that they met us in the first place, even if every single thing that they do doesn't involve us. We'll still
Absolutely.
be the connector that made it happen.
Mm.
Um, did I happen to see Rose Specter on your?
Yes, yes, you did. Yeah. Rose. Yeah. Rose is awesome. Yeah, she wasn't able to make it on the last couple. So she's actually been on two of my trees prior, and then she came on this one. So I was so excited when she decided she was all in. I'm like, yes. So yeah, that's awesome that you know Rose too. She is a gem of a human.
I wanted to give her a shout out because, like, what I have observed is she'll see certain people put out a podcast episode and she goes out of her way to listen. Like, anytime that I
Totally.
have Jordan Side on the show, a lot of times when I have you on the show, Andrew Coates puts out shows and she'll listen to his too. And
Yeah.
so she deserves a shout out
Yeah.
because she'll definitely stumble across this episode at some point. That said, when you were reflecting on people's experiences from this most recent trip, what would you say
Mhm.
was one of the pieces of feedback that you got or picked up on that surprised you the most?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, wow, that's a great question. Yeah, because I do like to solicit feedback just on every aspect of it, and we sort of do a debrief at the end. And I think one of the things that surprised me, maybe not so much with this past one, but originally when we had done them in Costa Rica, we were at this amazing place, and they were sort of individual cabins, right? So in more recent years, I've done the sort of the big house thing. And I thought, oh, geez, I don't think people are going to like this. I was kind of insecure about it. And then surprising feedback from that was they preferred like just being under one roof, right? Rather than sort of individual cabins because it increased sort of the community feel of everything. And I think maybe that's what surprised me the most, even with this past one, is people are like, yeah, no, I mean, I came here with largely strangers, although they knew a few people, but we left as friends. And that sort of stands out to me is that just in that focused, concentrated week of time where you're in community with people, you're working out beside them, you're doing yoga beside them, you're sharing your thoughts beside them, you're going on these adventures together. I think it really accelerates a relationship in a sense. And I think you kind of touched on that a little bit too, is just you're bringing a different element to it. You're in this environment where it's like, yeah, you're really sort of deepening the experience and the experiential feel of everything. So I think that's one thing that continues to surprise me. I don't know if it was specific to this one, but I think people really, because I think it's like hosting a party. You're like, oh, I hope everybody gets along. And I'm always stressed out the first 3 days before I can kind of relax into a little bit. but I've just been amazed at just how much people sort of connect with each other and get along well, and in a lot of cases just become pretty close friends. So I think that element is pretty amazing. And everybody has different personality types, so you kind of wonder, oh shoot, is are these people going to get? But everybody sort of it unites because they're there for maybe slightly different reasons, but they're all there uh, for I would say a central reason to they want something. They want something a little deeper. They want an experience, and they're all there under that premise and under that guise. And it's yeah. So I'd say sort of the connections and the deepening of connections and the formation of friendships is something that continuously surprises me with this.
I love that. As a side tangent, I'll kind of share some of the experiences that I've had outside of the fitness industry, where I've
Yeah.
been part of a group of like local entrepreneurs, and we get all kinds of opportunities to invest internationally. And part of that is building connections. And
Mm,
so the connection building that I experience as a coach and trainer benefits me greatly when it comes to kind of diversifying my income stream, connecting with new mentors, getting different opportunities. It kind of falls under the lens of like it's not always what you know, it's who you know. And
hmm
so my ability to be in the cool rooms and at the cool tables has been enhanced from that. But a lot of it is because of certain character traits. And
mm,
what we find is like when we are assembling a group of people, those people have certain character traits. Now, I know the traits that are looked for in that instance, but I'd be curious to know if there's any character traits that you could identify within the people who join you on your trips.
yeah. And I think and you use the word, oh, you're curious to find out, but curiosity does come to mind. I feel that people have that thirst for knowledge and learning. And it's, I have a hard time summer almost positioning this retreat because it's a health retreat, but it's not. It's kind of agnostic, and it's not a super healthy retreat where we're just we're eating kale all day and meditating for 4 hours, right? I call it a flexible health retreat because yeah, some people we have like a happy hour and we get dessert on some nights and so it's a little bit harder to define, but I think everybody's coming there because there's a curiosity there. There's a sense of adventure there. There's yeah, just I think they are wanting something. They're wanting to enhance their health in some way, and they're wanting to find different ways to do that and different experiences. And they want that adventure that's not necessarily like an all inclusive, but it's not a stringent like boot campy type of an experience, right? I feel like um, the desired outcome for a lot of people, and I think that this is what they seek, even without saying as much, but they want to feel the sort of the ranges of human emotion. So they want to experience, that slight discomfort of the exercise or the yoga, and everybody's going to have different levels of comfort and discomfort, but they also want to feel that deep relaxation, whether that's sort of laying on a hammock. And Rose, that's another shout out to you. Rose loves the hammocks. And every time we go on a retreat, I got to have a hammock for Rose. But I want people to feel those ranges of just like that deep relaxation, but also that invigoration of the exercise and that just slightly scary feeling of the adventures. So in this case, it was scuba diving. They weren't man-eating sharks, but they were sharks. But that sort of thing where people feel those ranges of emotions and the ranges of human experience and getting to do that. And I think that's what people seek out. And hopefully that's the outcome when they leave. They feel like, oh yeah, like that was not only a fun time and met new people, but it was like, yeah, there was some pretty transformational things in there too, and that I can take with me in my day-to-day life.
Absolutely. One of the other things that has been on my mind as we've been preparing for today's episode is books. Books are something that I enjoy consuming. I generally go through and do the audiobook just because I'm
Mm,
multitasking and busy guy. But that said, whether it's print book or audiobook or even just like a very short book that may not be widely available, what
mm,
are, let's start with two. two books that you have found to be
Mm.
profoundly impactful on you for any reason in the last year or so.
Okay, so last year or so, I would say I read Brad Stulberg's book, Master of Change, fairly recently, and that one stood out as being really impactful. And yeah, I think there's a lot to that in that, we're going to be hit with all sorts of different angles, and we live in a world of instability, right? Whether it's geopolitical instability or financial instability, environmental instability, all sorts of political stuff going on. And it really is sort of a beacon of just like, yeah, no, life is going to throw a lot of different stuff at you, and you live in a world of instability. And I think it's just instilling that ability to change through life's kind of cascades of things that get thrown at us. And I think, yeah, there, and he just weaves in a lot of really good stories, and he's just a good stats guy too. So I love that he throws a lot of the evidence-based stuff in there. So I think that was one in the last year that's really impacted me last year. And I think if I were to name another one, it's probably Morgan Housel's latest book, and that was Same as Ever. So he wrote The Psychology of Money. I think that's his more popular book. His most recent one I read probably about a year ago, I want to say, maybe a year and a half. Um, and yeah, that was an eye-opening one too. And I think I like the premise of that because I think we focus a lot on trying to make predictions and what's going to change, how things are going to change. Um, and his entire ideologies has to do with, okay, what's going to stay the same, and let's make decisions based on that. So I found there's a lot of really good nuggets in there. And it's funny because you mentioned off the top, okay, I do sort of consume a lot of books and podcasts and whatnot. So now I have to start writing notes because I'll tell people, oh, this is really cool. And they're like, why do you think it's cool? I'm like, oh, I don't know, just read it. Right. Because I think, like, maybe I retain 5% of it, but those two stand out in the last year. But yeah, I will give a shout out to, because I haven't quite finished it yet, but Jonathan Goodman, who we both had a chance to connect with in Edmonton. The Obvious Choice, like that one's excellent. And I think, what I've read for it so far, I'm about three-quarters of the way through, I think. Yeah, I have to give him his flowers because that's yeah, I'm learning a lot from his books too. And I've heard, just I've learned so much from Jonathan in the last probably 15 years since I started following him. So if I'm allowed to throw a bonus one in there, I'll throw that one.
Totally, absolutely. And like the funny thing is, I actually had his book just like surprise delivered to my like front door. And I was like, what is going
Nice.
on? So yeah, I've got it in my bookshelf. I haven't quite dug through it all, but I've gotten
Hmm.
a good start. And the thing that I really enjoy about people's ability to put stuff out there. Like for example, like anybody who would like to can start a podcast. Anybody who would like
Hmm.
to can start a YouTube channel. We're gonna circle back to that because I have some stuff I want to chat about with that.
Sure. Yeah.
And then anybody who would like to can have a book. And you have your book. You have at least one published book, right?
Yeah.
And so on that topic, because as time has gone on, I've realized there are sort of paths that I can take where I can do something self-published on-demand print. And I've
Hmm.
considered the idea of like creating a book for myself based on everything that I've learned over the course of my path
Oh.
as a podcaster and in my career.
Hmm.
But I kind of want to hear where you're at with creating through print and if you have any
Hmm.
plans to create another book to follow up your other one.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I can't believe it. It has been like, I'm trying to go back in my head to see how long it's been. It's been over 5 years, 5.5 years, which is crazy. I think it was November of 2019. And I think it was just pre-pandemic. So once the pandemic hit, time shrunk, time expanded, time just went into this bizarre warp, and just I don't know what happened to the last 5 years really. But yeah, I can't believe it was that long ago. And yeah, no, I mean it's a labor of love, and I would eventually like to write another book for sure. Right now, my focus is a little bit more with the content creation with like YouTube and the coaching program that we're currently running. But yeah, no, it's always sort of been in my head to write again, and it always takes about 10 times longer than I expected to. So I did create. This was about 12 years ago now. It's available on ebook. It's still available on Amazon. It's called Talking Back to Diet Guru. So it was basically, about 100 or so pages. And then from that point, I was like, okay, I'm going to write another book within a year. Okay, well, it took me like 6 years. And then after I published that last book 5.5 years ago, I'm like, okay, I'm going to write another book within 2 years because that's more realistic. And now it's been almost six and I haven't. So I do have those ideas swimming around. I'm like a little bit better now at taking notes on the go. Like my all my note taking is a complete hot mess. Like I've got like whether it's Google Docs or written on cocktail napkins, notebooks, like audio files. I've got it all everywhere. So I just need some. I'm waiting for that AI program that's just going to consolidate everything. That probably is something that can do that I'm unaware of right now. But yeah, no, eventually. So I'm not even going to throw a timeline on it right now. But I'd say, yeah, the itch is there for sure. And I'd love to encourage you to do that because I think you've got a wealth of knowledge. So if you're thinking about it, yeah, yeah, do it. The barrier of entry, as you say, whether it's starting a podcast, whether it's writing a book or creating something, is quite low now. So yeah, I mean, you got some great stuff. Put it out there.
Well, and I appreciate everything that you said with regards to my creative process. And there's a few things that you said that I think will be helpful, so I'll echo them. But the reason that
Mm,
I ask anybody about their creative process is to just kind of like open up the floor to people who are hesitant about doing things because they think that the process was more perfect for somebody else. And because
mm,
when they're in that state of creation, they're thinking it isn't going to plan, so I should just quit.
mm,
And like I have had so many like one-on-one conversations, either recorded or off air, with individual fitness professionals where like they set out to do something in like 2 years and it took them
mhm,
6 years. Or they set a goal that was like blah, 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 blah. And what actually happened was completely different, but they weren't dissatisfied. The
mm.
only scenario where would have felt disappointed with themselves is probably if they would have just given up on everything altogether and done a complete
Yeah,
360 and gone a different way. Um,
totally.
so that was definitely one thing that I wanted to highlight because the most important thing is the intent to do something. And it's not so important as to the timeline that it takes. And it's not so
Mhm,
important that it needs to be perfect the first iteration. It's just that intent. And like even just me admitting to you that I'm kind of like in the works of crafting together something based on all the experiences that I've gained and the
mhm.
unique knowledge that I have, that kind of like holds me accountable. And then I like to kind of like, I'm like, ha ha ha, I got you saying you're going to do another book. I'm going to publish it now. Whenever I
Yeah,
do that, it's like the best accountability trick ever.
absolutely.
Because
No, it's so
I'll
true. Yeah.
I'll even send like the episode to somebody like 2 years later. I'm like, how's that project coming on? And I either just absolutely poke the bear or I get them going again. Like sometimes it's like bad time and they're like, you know what? I'm doing a home renovation. I got enough things to deal with. I'm like, okay, I'll circle back in another
Yeah.
2 years.
That's good though. I love it. We can keep each other accountable every once in a while. Just ping in, go. So Chris, yeah, that's that book coming along. You could say, oh, probably as good as your book, and I'll be like, yeah, no, you're right.
Well
But
played, yeah.
that's so true. That's so true. And it actually took, yeah, just a quick story. It took me kind of hiring an editor. I definitely needed an editor. I self-published. And I was like, okay, I gotta find an editor. So somebody passed me along to this lady. She said, okay, great. I want a draft on September 30th. I'm like, oh, you mean you're actually going to hold me to this? And I'm like, yeah. So I'm like, so that's kind of what I needed, right? I'm like, otherwise I write when I feel like writing, and or like, okay, I'll put it off. It's always sort of, secondary to the stuff I have to get done. And to an extent, obviously, you have to do the things that are going to make you money that, the other obligations of life. But yeah, no, there comes a time where it's like, okay, yeah, there's this deadline. You have to write it by this time. And yeah, no, I wrote it, and she kind of got back to me and with red pen the whole thing, and I'm like, because it's not just writing. Now you have to edit. Now this is a whole different process, like writing another book. So that last stretch, kind of, it's a bit. But yeah, no, it's like you said. I mean, you're going to regret not doing it far more than you will doing it, right? Even though it's like, okay, and I have to say this with all honesty to anybody looking to publish a book: if you're looking to do this to make money, forget it. Don't. You know what? There's a small chance you may make some money. Maybe it'll become a bestseller, but don't, if you're doing this because you think it's going to make you some extra coin, you're going to retire in the next couple of years. Yeah, don't. I don't think that's the right reason. Yeah, and not to discourage anybody, it may become a bestseller. Oprah might read it, and you'll be on Mel Robbins' podcast and Chris's podcast, and but yeah, no. So I think it has to be something that you're prepared to have as a loss. But I mean, there is that sense of accomplishment. Yeah, I did that. I wrote that book. And I'll be honest, it's been over 5 years. If I were to read that book again, I would change a lot. I think it's an okay book now, but I reflect on it. It was very well received, I have to say. People did like it, people in my industry. But yeah, I feel like I've learned a lot of different things since then. So there's a lot that I would change in the book as
Mhm.
well. So there's that as well. And I think that's part of what gives me that fire to write another one at some point.
Totally. And I mean, there's a few points that I can come off of from that. Like over the many different interviews that I've done with people, I've often dug a bit deeper as to like what inspired them to write a book. And I've definitely encountered some people who are trying to like take shortcuts, and I can't find them on social media anymore. And so
Mm,
like it is just this boom bust cycle where if you're trying to do something faster than
hmm
what might be like the mainstream pace that it takes to do it is not
hmm
likely sustainable. Like maybe you can make your mistakes faster and just keep trying, keep trying, keep trying. That's okay. But to
hmm
think that you're going to get it and just nail it on that first time is not realistic. And I think one of the best things that I heard about just creating written content in book form was from Jason Leonards. And
Yeah.
he essentially shared that it was like having a very expensive business card.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
the analogy that I think about when I think about a book, like I've talked to Lee Boyce about his book,
Mm,
and at length, like if anything, if I was to think of a really solid reason for all of us to create and put books out there, even just podcasts, it's because the connections that we make with people can be further
mm,
nurtured with these other resources that are part of our like ecosystem,
mm,
and it may come at a cost to them, which might not benefit us in a huge, tremendous way based on like
mhm,
commissions and cost to print and all that stuff. But it allows us to free up our time to impact them even more. So,
mm,
like every client that we work with, if they really enjoyed their experience with us, but we couldn't give them that extra hour per week, if they were to read our book or listen to our podcast, guaranteed extra hour per week. And like the impact
mm.
that that can have on people, I think that's worth putting aside.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and there's no better feeling than, getting a review or somebody that read the book that I don't know that said, "Wow, this was an amazing book. I've really changed a lot of things based on this book." I mean, that's what gives me joy, and that's what makes that worth it, right? Because yeah, you can spread your word out there in different ways that you might not be able to service people sort of in a one-to-one situation or even one to group situation, and you never know who's going to read that book of yours or whatever it is you've created and be inspired to change their lives based on that. And that's really hard to do in a one-to-one situation. So yeah, that's yeah, exactly. I think you're right on there.
Well, and something else that popped into my head is you're talking about how things have changed since you wrote your book and how you've seen things different. The cool thing that I've witnessed in listening to like the audiobook versions of books read by the author,
Hmm.
I'm going to use Stephen Pressfield as an example.
Hmm.
I got onto his work because I was on my way to go to Jasper for a indulgent birthday trip for myself. Every time I have a birthday that comes along, I just take myself to Jasper now. And
Fantastic.
so I messaged our mutual friend Andrew Coates, and I was
Mm.
like, I need some book recommendations for how to get out of my own way because there's a lot of things that I'm working on behind the scenes. I think it's probably going to be a big year, and like the biggest deciding factor of that is how much I can get out of my own way. And
Hmm.
so he recommended a few different authors, but the one that stood out to me the most was Stephen Pressfield.
Yeah.
And I just basically binge listened to like five of
Mm.
his titles. And as I listened
Yeah.
to some of the titles, he would reflect on like how he had written it. And then he
Yes.
added little like side notes to it in the dialogue.
Mm.
And I was like, we are all a work in progress. Like he
Totally.
has so much lived experience and professional accomplishments that
Hmm.
he can credit, but he is still evolving his process even at his level of mastery. Um,
Hmm.
so there's no reason why, like for example, if somebody had a book that they published like a few years ago, they could do like the audio version, and they could
Sure.
add those little updates in the audio version. And
Hmm.
to have a mind that's open to those possibilities is just exciting because it gives us more potential to do more things without as much hesitation to do the thing.
Yeah.
It helps us get
Yeah.
out of our own way in a sense.
Yeah.
Um,
100%.
that said, is there any is if you could choose a third book that we haven't discussed yet, would there be a
Mm.
third book? Because I think we got the brain juices flowing here.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, yeah, and I feel like I've read books that are mostly non-fitness, non-health books over the past, like I'd say even 7 or 8 years. So they tend to be in the fields of psychology or behavioral economics and to some degree entrepreneurship as well. And you mentioned Stephen Pressfield, and right away I'm like, yes, I mean that guy's one of the OGs of sort of like getting out of your own way. And in fact, I do still use a lot of his material as examples in my own works in my own book, like particularly resistance, right? Because that whole thing of resistance from the war of art, right? Like, resistance is quiet, it's sneaky, it's out to get you. And you have to just fight it every day. You have to battle it and get through it. And I guess the other one's turning pro. So that was another one that really kind of stood out. And those types of books, like you said, you can kind of put on repeat, maybe listen to them or read them once a year, once every 2 years, and just be like, yes, completely renewed by it. There's a few authors like that, like Seth Godin's another author. I like the works of Eric Barker too. He wrote one called Barking Up the Wrong Tree. I read that about 7 years ago, and his most recent one is called oh gosh, it'll come back to me. But oh yeah. Yeah, it'll come to me, but I find him to be a reliably excellent author, just in terms of his view on humanity and how humans behave and how we veer in certain directions that are not of our own thinking. And I think I just gravitate generally to books that are on like how the human brain works and how we operate. And I really took a deep dive into this because I wanted to be a better coach, to be honest. And through it, though, like it sort of put up a full length mirror and sort of exposed me to a lot of my own weaknesses and my own shortcomings and my own things that I had to work on. So it's interesting. Through that, I'm like, okay, I gotta work on this part in me that I'm trying to instill in others. And so yeah, I feel like it's, while I set out to read these books to help clients, they really have helped me in the process. So, Plays Well with Others is the name of the book by Eric Barker. So that was the one I was thinking of. But just, yeah, really, really interesting stories and just, yeah, how we think, how we behave, how we interact with others, how we need others to interact with. So I think those are some of the authors I've really benefited from. And If you have show notes, what I can do is sort of give a list of like, I don't know, like 8 to 10 if you want, like that I can't come up with right off the top of my head. But yeah, there's a few that definitely stand out, and I consume most of my books on Audible because I'm driving a lot, and so I just plug in a book or a podcast or something like that, and go with it there. But yeah, no, I love that sort of thing. Anything to do with the human brain, and a lot of books on sort of relationships, and that Harvard, that ongoing Harvard study of adult male development. It's like an 86-year long study now. So I'm reading a lot about sort of the results of that study. So how to deepen relationships, Daniel Pink's regret, like the power of regret. Yeah, there's a few books I've read that have really kind of stood out. I'm reading more on like acceptance and commitment therapy right now. So I'm just, yeah, trying to do a deep dive into the human brain and continuously fascinated and curious as to how things work. And the more I learn, the more I realize I just don't know anything. And I think it's a good thing because it gives me that drive to keep learning and keep growing, and but importantly, try to apply some of this stuff because I do have that tendency to just kind of consume, whereas I should just like take a few of these books and actually just apply the principles 100%. And I'd probably be further ahead than I am right now, but that's how that goes.
No, I mean, that was like a lot of really good takeaways. And for our audience's peace of mind, I'm a bit of a nerd. And so basically, everything that you shouted out will be incorporated in our show notes
Awesome.
because I utilize some of those handy dandy AI tools to pick out the
Yeah,
gold
there you go.
nuggets. Um,
Nice.
One of the things that I want to make sure that we cover in our time together today is that you are doing a big push for your YouTube. Now, I was just checking it out before we got recording, and is it under the Lean Minded? Is that the title of the
Correct. Yeah,
channel?
that's right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I,
Yeah.
I hit subscribe before we hit
Oh,
play.
thank you. I
Um,
appreciate that immensely.
but I can pick up on things. I'm intuitive to some degree. And there must have been a spark as to what kind of like catapulted you into that space and what made it easier for you. And I'd love to hear
Mm.
more about that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I have to shout out. I've got this amazing business partner, Sean Kelly, and he's the brains behind that operation, sort of the digital side of things. He has a deep understanding of that sort of thing, and he's been in the industry a long time, like myself. And so he kind of pushed that along because I was doing just more short form stuff. And I have to say, it's been a lot of just sort of really wrapping my head around it. I have a massive insecurity about being in front of a camera, and speaking. Public speaking is just not something that's ever come naturally to me. So it's something I've really had to work at. And even doing these short form videos, I'll do like 50 takes like before I put it out there. And yeah, so I think it's just being able to convey my entire message in a little bit more of a longer form, and something that's a little bit more I guess consumable and accessible to most people, and trying to find a bit of a different angle that people that don't think about quite as much. So taking it away from a little bit more of the X's and O's of say weight loss, and just boiling it down to more of the practicality of it, the mindset, the habits, the actions. And it's basically taking people from this place where it's like, okay, I feel stuck. I feel like I'm in a rut. I feel like I need to change. And where do I start? And I wanted that space, meaning the channel, to be that safe landing space for people who are just looking to kind of get out of that rut, get started, start making waves in their own health journey. And the it's branded under weight loss, and I get it, but it's just so much deeper than weight loss. It's about living your healthiest life, and it's about doing what's best for you under your given circumstances, whatever those circumstances are. So if I can help people sort of just break through bit by bit, I mean, that's the aim. That's the
Hmm.
bottom line. That's the end goal right there.
Well, some of the things, and these are things that I've explored in my own content creation. I've realized like I used to have like kind of like two sides to me. I'd have the side to me that was interested in technology and kind of content creation and just the gear and um, I sometimes I take an interest in real estate.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I like to, it's not so much that I think I'm going to be some real estate mogul. It's more so I like to understand how things work and
Yeah.
how communities can thrive and like where the opportunities are, like to make something better. But then I also have the fitness side where I think that, oh, I should just be coaching people. I should just show them how to do lateral raises and I should just
Mm-hmm.
talk about protein. And over the last year, I've realized if I find a way to bring it all together, I'm able to offer more because each of us individually have a lot of unique life experiences that we kind of hide behind the curtain. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, like you have so much travel experience and travel experience with other different personalities that many people in the space cannot speak to. Like
Mm-hmm.
they cannot there's a lot of things that we can kind of carbon copy of each other, but not that. And like for
Mm-hmm.
me, there's a lot of elements to my journey leading into my fitness career that nobody can replicate. And when I started to realize that, I was like, okay, this is how you differentiate yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You actually like share the body of work of your life in public view as a whole. So like I can share my experiences with footwear for training and walking based on my experience as being a footwear manager like 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like I could share my experience in competition both as of recent in jujitsu, but also going back and thinking about my competition when I was a cross country runner.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and no matter who you or I would talk to, they would have those same like dual snapshots where there's like a snapshot that they can share from earlier in life and a snapshot that they can share from later in life.
Mm-hmm.
And the only people who might be kind of like frozen and unable to do this are the people who still have to seek out their mentor, people who still have to have more experiences. And who I'm speaking to is specifically like 20 years old people, like people who are just like, they're just starting their life as an adult and they still
Mm-hmm.
need to put in the reps and they still need to make mistakes. I'm all about seeing potential in young people because I was one of them too at one point,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm also about like really acknowledging how impactful having certain people in your circle can be.
Yeah.
And I'll even give another really good shout out to Andrew Coates because I've
Yeah.
reflected because he is one of like maybe three people who have been in my career um, for the entire evolution of it, or at least been aware of the evolution of my career
Mm-hmm.
because he knew me when I was a spin instructor. He knew me when I had connections with a fitness magazine. He knew me when I worked for a private gym. He knew me when I went out independent. And he has seen me diversify my skill set. And a lot of people have come and gone. And so to have somebody like him with his mindset where he is also an evolution, like I knew him
Mm-hmm.
when he had 1,800 followers on Instagram,
Yeah.
and I knew him when most of his posts were long form on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there when his first articles got published on T Nation. I got to see like
Mm.
the twinkle in his eye.
Yeah.
And so, like, to have people like that in your world is far more beneficial than trying to be that person who knows everything at 21
Mm-hmm.
years old.
Oh,
And
for sure. Yeah.
like one more thing that you pointed out that I think is valuable, so we can kind of riff on it to just amplify it, is that the more you know, the less you know, kind of thing, as a
Mm-hmm.
paraphrase. And I think people don't absorb that enough because everybody that I look up to has expressed that at some point where they have talked about how, like, despite the fact that they have all these accolades to their name, they are now going to learn a new language, or they're going to get their master's, or they're
Mm-hmm.
going to try a sport that they haven't tried before. Like, we can use Mike Dola as an example. He's doing
Mm.
pickleball. He hasn't done
Yeah.
pickleball his whole life,
Yeah.
but he's diving into it and he had to learn new skills. And then the
Absolutely.
other path for a lot of like 30 plus personal trainers is jujitsu. If you're not doing
Yeah.
pickleball, you're doing jujitsu.
Yeah, it's so true.
And it's just like the willingness to always be a beginner can
Yes.
differentiate people in such massive ways, and the willingness to look around the room and like, even though I say that younger people should always have people that they're learning from or people that they surround themselves with, I am
Hmm.
a huge advocate that I can 100% learn new things from a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old,
Yeah.
a 12-year-old, 20-year-old. And that is just simply because we all look at the world in different ways and we
Mm.
all have different ways of like positioning what we're seeing. And I think that is important for us to all kind of collaborate in
Oh yeah.
ways. Um,
100%. Yeah.
but that said, hopefully my ramble didn't lose our entire audience. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you one final opportunity to share with our audience a piece of advice that you think might help them based on our discussion that we've had, just to kind of close our episode to a nice final.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And just to riff off what you just said, I mean, just learning from different age groups, and you related your experience to jujitsu, and it's hilarious. Yeah, yeah, they're going to BJJ or they go into pickleball. It's funny. And I just wrote an article. I basically finished it like a couple of hours ago, and it was just how I've gotten back into Muay Thai like in the last couple of years, and like I'm just like battling that self doubt, like that. Oh my gosh, everybody's much younger than me. They're stronger than me. They're fitter than me. And like, oh, why am I doing this? And then it's like, and then I'm like, you feel that invigoration from it and what have you. And just everything about learning from different people of different ages. Like my son does my editing, right? So that's another example of that where it's just like, I have such a steep learning curve with the tech stuff. And I'm asking about certain things. He's giving me this side, like, what, you don't know? Okay, this is just, he's giving me that, like, this is pretty basic. I'm like, shut up. Yeah, I was watching you put SpaghettiOs up your nose. Like, don't look at me like that. But yeah, no, but it's funny. It's amazing for that sort of thing to come full circle. But I think in terms of like, yeah, just everything that we've talked about, and if I were to sort of tie it up in a nice bow and land this plane as it were, just I think encouraging people that it's like I think no matter where you are, you're never more than like a few minutes away from changing your life in a more positive trajectory. And as we've talked about it, and just I think one of the themes is it's amazing hearing your story too, Chris, about like everything that like all the different hats that you've worn, both in the industry and not in the industry, and that got me to reflect on my journey as well. And I'm a very late bloomer with a lot of this stuff, and I'm still learning. And I think if we have that mentality where we can learn new things, we can stretch outside of that comfort a little bit and try new things. That Japanese term called misoji, right, where you're doing something that's a little bit hard, like a task that that's a little bit out of reach, but you can still do it. And just choosing something in your life where you are kind of stretching what you think is possible, and also knowing that what, you are going to fall off. Your book might take 6 years, it might take more, that the time's going to pass anyway. But if we keep chipping away at it, and knowing that we're going to regret not doing that far more than we will regret doing it. And whether it's like, okay, if you decide that you're like, okay, jujitsu isn't doing it for me, like 5 years down the road, all the skills that you learned, man, and hats off. Like I've been doing both the Muay Thai and the Jiu-Jitsu, but I haven't done the Jiu-Jitsu in a while. I honestly, I find it so freaking hard. It's such a different stimulus than Muay Thai and other martial arts. But I know I need to go back there and do it. And it's a long story. I've had surgery on my neck, so I don't like particularly going up to people. Okay, can you just go easy on my neck? Jiu-Jitsu is terrible for necks. But anyway, that's a sidebar. But yeah, I think if there's one message, it's like, yeah, like your life, your trajectory is going to take so many different twists and turns. And like, yeah, no, that it's never too late to sort of learn that new skill, find that new path, and just yeah, live your healthiest life and your best life possible. And yeah, find your way.
I love it. And I just have to say thank you for making the time for me today and for coming back on the show, Mike.
No, thank you, Chris. This has been a blast, and you are a gift to the industry, and appreciate you. And shout out to Andrew Coates as well. That guy is amazing.